This episode of Now This Is Lit is brought to you by Audible. Check the link in the description to get your first Star Wars audiobook free. Everyone loves free things. Click that link. Do it. This show is also brought to you by our patrons. If you want to support the show in a different way, with just $1 a month, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/StarWarsLitPod. You can get a sticker. You can get access to an exclusive show that we do every month that's wild and chaotic and fun and something you can only get by becoming a member of the Patreon. There'll be so many more perks very, very soon. But for now, do you want a sticker? Do you want a sticker that has a Now This Is Lit logo? Because it's fantastic and I love them. But I also want to give them away because there's just a stack of stickers on my desk. So if you want one, $1 a month. Patreon.com/StarWarsLitPod. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. You're listening to Now This Is Lit, a podcast about Star Wars books, the people who make them, and the readers who just can't get enough of them. I'm your host, Meg Dowell. I use she, her pronouns. And today, I have another patron joining me to talk about a book. That book is Crimson Climb by E.K. Johnston, and that patron is Haley, who is also a fellow podcaster, so I thought it would be fun for us to reread the book and then sit down and finally talk about it. I love when we get to talk about young adult books on this show. We don't do it enough. I hope you enjoy this wonderful conversation about a truly amazing book.
Sometimes it's like I have to like keep track in my head of who has podcasted before and who has not. Depending on who I'm talking to, because like it's not that different. And I don't like if someone's never done a podcast before. In fact, some of the best guests I've ever had have never done podcasts before, and they're like, I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm like, you're just talking about Star Wars. It's totally fine.
Yeah.
So I'm never like, I'll do a call for guests every once in a while, and people are like, do I have to be a podcaster? I'm like, no, you can be whoever you want.
Just pretend you're not podcasting.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, sometimes it's different. If someone, quote unquote,
people either have it or they don't, is what I've noticed.
Yeah. Sometimes people will talk for 5 minutes straight and I don't have to do anything, and that's great for them. And sometimes I'll ask one question, I'll get one sentence, and we just keep going like that. And you know what? That's fine. That's how it is.
Yeah. Hey, it gives variety at least.
Yeah. No, I've never had like, because I choose my guests carefully, I would say. I've never had like an issue where I'm like, this is no conversation. But you know, you always are prepared for that. I mean, hence my notes, just in case.
I love notes. And my notes were like, if I write this down, it'll be in my head now, and I probably won't have to refer to these, but I probably will.
No, I'm the same way. Like, I'll write things down specifically because I know once I do that, I will not have to remember it or think about it. Like once, like it happens to me with dates. Like I keep my calendar of all the things that I have to do, but like I will remember. I've had the 18th is the Crimson Climb recording in my head since I wrote it down. I'm like, that's how it is. But you know what? Whatever
works.
My
calendar, and therefore it's etched in stone.
Yeah, that's how it is. It's actually been. I like to try to reread the books before I do the discussion on them, especially if it's been this long. And I did not reread this one, but it's not going to be a problem. It usually isn't. Yeah. Because usually, like, I like going in depth with things, but also there are people who like to do like a chapter by chapter recap, and I'm like, I just like going like broader. It's just more fun.
Yeah.
To me, because like, you know, presumably if someone has read the book or they want to read the book, maybe they don't like it. This is a spoiler discussion, but like I don't usually end up spoiling a ton of things. I mean, we will, but I'm like, I'm not going to tell you.
Yeah, it lends to that.
Yeah. Love this book. And we'll talk about how much we love it. Still a little bit upset. And it may be the circles that I'm in, the people that I follow, but no one talked about this book when it came out, and that just makes me so sad.
And because it was just last year that it came out.
Yeah, I think October, maybe.
It didn't. Yeah, I think it was October. I should have got my copy down. I have it on Kindle too because I'm that person.
Mhm.
But yeah, I agree. It was, and yeah, it was not, and I feel like it's Solo, right? Solo gets such a
Mhm.
bad rap, which
Yeah.
it totally doesn't deserve. And
Oh.
Qi'ra is such a great character in
Yeah.
it, but we don't get a lot of time with her, and so
No.
maybe it's just like it skated under the radar because it wasn't the main storyline kind of characters. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, and it's like it's not the High Republic's fault. High Republic did come out like right before that and right after
True.
that. Um, it YA doesn't always technically typically get as much attention, which is a whole other thing that I am consistently upset about.
Hmm.
Because I think like some of the just in general, some of the Star Wars YA books are some of my favorites. Um, E.K. Johnston is one of my favorite storytellers in Star Wars. That's not a very popular opinion. I understand.
Sure.
But you know, we'll talk more in depth about why her whole thing.
Right.
But let's start though
Okay.
by talking about you. First
Ah,
time on the show. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
thank you.
Uh, you are a patron of the Now This Is Lit Patreon, which means I reached out to you and I was like, do you want to be a guest? Do you want to talk about a book? And you were like, yes, please.
Like,
So,
absolutely.
so here.
Also means I get the awesome nameless episodes, which people should 100% join the Patreon to listen to because they are fantastically
They
funny.
are, we have yet to get, for anyone who doesn't know, basically the entire show is a random number generator picks what book we talk about. We go into the episode not knowing what book we're going to talk about, and it's all Star Wars books. We just have a list and it picks a book. We have yet to pick a canon book. We have yet to pick a book that both of us have read. I think every single book that we've gotten so far, neither of us have read.
Yeah,
Which actually
it's
makes
great.
for makes for a fun conversation because then we're like, well, how can we make a 35-minute conversation out of not knowing what we're talking about? But it's fun because every once in a while someone will message and be like, this is hilarious because I have read this book and you did not know what you're talking about, but it was great. And that's exactly what I was going for.
Yeah, it's very fun. So everybody join the Patreon.
It's very fun. One extra episode per month. And it's chaotic and I don't edit it, and that just makes it 1,000 times better. So let's tell me, first, tell me what Star Wars you're reading right now, or the most recent Star Wars that you have read.
So I'm currently reading, because I was on this Qi'ra kick, Most Wanted, which was like next up on my Kindle. And I was like, okay, and it's been super fun. But I did start and finish The Living Force last week, which I just really, really loved. I didn't read any of the excerpts that they put out because I wanted just to go into it fresh.
Love that.
And it was absolutely nothing like what I thought it would be. You see the Living Force, and it's this dramatic cover with the Jedi Council. And I thought, oh, they're going to be having like these deep philosophical discussions or something, you know? No. I mean, yes, but no.
Yes,
fantastic.
but also you're going to laugh out loud. Like, I actually laughed out loud, cackled, I believe, at one point. Just recorded our discussion on that, which will come out not now, but I think everyone who read this book who maybe had been expecting something did not expect it to be exactly what it was, and that made it even better. Highly recommend if you have not read it, especially if you're a fan of the prequels. If you've read the High Republic, you don't have to have read the High Republic to like appreciate the book, but if you have, it's a little nice like sandwich between like, here are the Jedi, here's how the Jedi were in the High Republic. We know where they're going to end up. And here they are now, kind of in that middle, year before the Phantom Menace, realizing the issues that they are having, maybe a little too late. But it's such a good book, start to finish. It's so good.
I kind of read it not concurrently, but right after I'd finished reading Rule of Two for my show. And I was like, gosh, the good thing about Legends and canon books is that they all tackle the Jedi in this similar way where it's like you always have this problem of what the Jedi are perceived as.
Yeah.
And I really love when books poke holes in that. That's one of my favorite like Star Wars things to do. Even though I love the Jedi, but I like to see them questioned. And both of them did that. And I was reading them both at the same time, and I was like, this is kind of weird.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love that.
It was fun. Yeah.
I love that trilogy as well. It's been a while since I read it. I always say I'm due for a reread, but that's like all Star Wars. I just want to reread it all the time.
Yeah,
which I can't do because
no, they keep putting out new ones.
They just like keep making more Star Wars books. I don't know what's going on with that. They just won't stop.
It's like people like it or something. It's so weird.
It's like it's so popular.
It's like people podcast about it and stuff.
It's like people spend hours and hours of their time reading, analyzing, talking about, obsessing over, collecting.
I do love your collection. I'm super jealous.
It's a mess. I'm waiting for, we're renovating our basement to create basically more room for me to be able to have more books on my shelves. Oh, that's not the only reason, but it's a major reason.
And even if it was, it's a great one.
Yeah. We're both collectors, which means there's just stuff everywhere, which is not a bad thing. But we're like, we would like some shelf space for other things that are not Darth Vader figurines, General Grievous comics. What else is in here? All the Funko that's everywhere. It's too much. I'm not complaining. Yeah.
I love it.
I just like books. They're great. They're great.
I do too.
Tell me about your history with Star Wars books. You podcast now. How did you get from where you started to where you are now?
Oh man. So I kind of tout myself as a little bit of a Johnny come lately to this side of Star Wars for sure. Always watched the movies growing up. I can remember the first time I watched Empire Strikes Back. You know, we all have that kind of first memory.
Mm-hmm.
But it was not until COVID when I was at home from work, not really working that much because my job didn't really lend to it during COVID.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know, I had all this time on my hands and Mandalorian was still new. And when it had ended with Gideon having the Darksaber, I was like, what is that? Went down an internet rabbit hole and I was like, the Clone Wars, huh? Okay. So I watched all of the Clone Wars TV show. And then I made my husband watch it and I watched it again with him. It spiraled so quickly. And then we went right into watching Rebels, which is my all-time favorite Star Wars content now.
So good.
I'm currently rewatching it, my annual spring rewatch. And then that was kind of concurrently happening while I met a bunch of people online doing Marvel trivia, actually, originally. And that's how I met my co-host Brian over on my podcast Source Pages. And Brian's a big Star Wars person. He's involved with Rebel Force Radio podcast, and he not only like deepened my like knowledge of Star Wars with the book stuff, but that podcast that we do just got me back into my love of reading, which I'd kind of fallen off of in my 20s and early 30s. And I was such a huge reader growing up that I was like, I've been missing out. And now I'm like probably over consuming reading. But I can't really get enough of it. So currently working through the Disney canon as much as I can, which I'm getting close to finishing on that, which that's taken me about 3 or so years now. And then I'm going to go through Legends and I'm reading some of them along the way, but that's my goal. That'll take a while.
Yeah.
A long while.
Yeah.
But it's been so fun because one of the things I love about Star Wars, the gaps in time allow for these stories to be told. And some people don't like that because they're like, well, you know what happens in the end. I'm like, yeah, I know. But this is related but unrelated, and it just deepens the lore of the universe, and
Yes.
it deepens my love of the franchise and all the story that's left to tell.
Yes. Yeah. That's also my favorite thing. I think some of the best Star Wars stories are the ones that, enrich the universe where you didn't need it. You don't need it to understand something that happens later, but when you have what happens later, but you don't know exactly how you get to that point, it's almost more exciting because you're like, well, why did, this character get to a point where they made this choice that led to this? I think that's so beautiful and so fun. And like,
Mhm.
imagine like being a storyteller, getting to like work backwards and put all those pieces together. It's fun for everyone, I
Yeah.
think.
It's like detective work for them, I would think.
Yeah.
They still have to know a lot of things because you have to be accurate because the
Yeah.
fans will come for you if you don't.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
And so if you misstep, they'll know and you'll be, not on the chopping block, but maybe a little bit.
Yeah.
And so that's got to be fun as an author to be like, okay, I have to watch Star Wars shows. Oh, darn. Like,
The worst. This is for work.
yeah. No, it's the best.
Oh, you watched all of Clone Wars because of the dark saber.
I did. I know. It's crazy. It's crazy that I watched it twice in a row.
I mean, it
But
is
it's
good.
fun.
It's good. It's so good.
It's really
And
good.
I
And
think
then
it's
that
really
spring was when like the final season came out.
uh-huh.
Oh my gosh. I was up at like 7 a.m.
Good.
watching it on my phone like a psychopath,
No.
The best.
Oh, um, I the first time I watched the Clone Wars, I watched it like in release order. But the second time I watched it, I went and I tried to watch it in chronological order because the episodes technically aren't chronological for whatever reason.
Right.
And it's so interesting to do it that way because you're like, it doesn't need to be this way, but it's fun. But it's wild because I don't remember what the exact order is, but you'll be watching like a couple episodes from season 1, and then you like jump to season 3, and it's like,
Yeah.
what are we doing? But it's very fun. And then like doing that and then going backwards and knowing like, oh, they just like did this episode in season 3 because they could. I think
Right.
that's wonderful.
It's very Star Wars, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Why would we do this in chronological order?
What's the point? No, I really do think it makes it better. Same with the High Republic, starting at one point,
Mhm.
going backwards. And now that we're going forwards again, it's like, oh, now you're seeing stuff from phase 2 coming back and being relevant for phase 3. I love it.
I really think that I really love phase 2, actually. I
Yeah,
know it
me
got
too.
a lot of flack, but those young adult novels in phase 2, young adult novels again,
Yes.
are like my favorites out of the whole High Republic
Yeah.
still. Eye of Darkness was really good though.
Yes.
But I think that if they'd done chronological, I don't think it would have been as successful
Yeah.
as it has been for sure.
Yeah. The only thing I didn't like about phase 2 is it was shorter. That's my only
Yeah.
complaint. I mean, it had to be that way. The story they needed to tell was told. It all worked out, but still, I was like, but Ziri and Fontu, like we need more of them though. We need more. Who knows?
And I mean, there are some serious like plot twists in phase 2.
Really? I know. It's like
And people are like, it's boring. I'm like, did you read the books?
Did you read all of them? Did you like read all of the chapters?
I did say originally, I was like, I'll just read the adult novels and the young adult novels. And then the Acolyte trailer came out, and my friend was like, you really should read the junior novels.
Yep.
And I was like, oh my God.
Yep.
So now I'm doing that too. So I'm doing that as well. Because crazy.
Yes. Well, with the Acolyte trailer, I have been telling people, I'm like, I know that a lot of people say the middle grade young reader stuff doesn't matter, but like Venestra's origin is in the first one. Like you have just read it. Like it's not everyone likes them. That's fine. I always say give them a try. You never know. Even if there's just like one character that you like that makes you smile, like it is what it is. But Venestra, that's her first, like that's where you meet her. I think at the very least that a test of courage is very important. perspective.
Mm-hmm,
You want that.
And I mean, they're quick too. Like,
yeah.
You can buzz through those.
Yeah. Give yourself a weekend, you know? Yeah. Oh, books are so cool.
I love Star Wars books.
Me too. We should talk about them on a podcast episode sometime.
That's a great idea.
Crimson Climb. I remember when this book was first announced. And I was like, first of all, I love that E.K. Johnston is back doing another book. I know a lot of people are going to be like, I don't agree. That's fine. The beautiful thing about Star Wars books is everyone is entitled to their own opinion. And that's fine. But when I found out she was writing Qi'ra, I was like, is this going to be the Solo 2 that we are never going to get? It's not really that, but it's almost better, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because, Solo really, a lot of it follows Han, which is fine, which is great. But this book really allows you to focus on, like, you don't see Qi'ra's journey from the beginning of that movie to where we meet her again later in the film. And this book is like, you wanted that, you wanted to know all of that backstory. Well, here you go. And I love books like that. And something that some people struggle with when it comes to E.K. Johnston Star Wars books, or her books in general, is she's very, very, very good at writing characters. And that's mainly where her books are strongest. I think in a lot of ways, this is a compliment, because she does it very well, which is the plot often comes second to the characters, but it works, because it's character driven. So your characters, Qi'ra, for example, and everyone that she meets, like, all of her characters are so memorable. Like, I don't remember all of their names, but it's been a while since I've read this book. Like, I think I read it before it officially came out. So September maybe. And I still remember, like, oh, she met this person and they did this. It's just always so well done. And that's not everyone's style. A lot of people are like, well, I like more like plot heavy, action heavy, which is fine. But I think if you're going to look at one of E.K. Johnston's strengths, it's definitely her memorable characters and kind of how they drive the story, as opposed to where those characters are going. They have their motivations, of course, but you're going to spend a lot of time getting to know everyone. And that's definitely not everyone's thing, but I personally love it.
Yeah, I'm one of those people for whom the plots do move slowly in her books, but the Ahsoka novel aside, like, her books that she's written for Star Wars aren't action heavy books. And usually when they are, it's in the third act of the book, which like this one is extremely, we'll get to it, but I mean, and then you're kind of hit in the face with it almost, which I like, because it kind of wakes me up and I'm like, oh, okay, like now all of these things are coalescing together and turning into this really huge end of the story.
Yeah.
But I do, like, I've struggled, I listened to Ahsoka, and while I love Ashley Eckstein so much, it didn't do it for me, the audio version. Love her to pieces. But it's just Ahsoka reading you the book, right?
Yeah.
So I need to, like, read it. It's on my shelf. I need to read it. And then the Padme novels I'm not finished with just yet, but yeah, it's exactly what you said. I think, and I don't think that's a bad thing either. And I don't want a story that's all just lightsabers clashing and starships zooming. Like, I want to get to know these people. And with Qi'ra, because she's somebody who doesn't let anybody get close to her, I think it was even more important that the characters are very meaningful, because then you have your feelings at the end of the book.
Right. I really just, every part of this book, just like her struggle to constantly survive and get to the next thing. And I think one of the most important things for me in this book actually was the fact that Han still mattered to her, but I think what I did not want was for her to mention him on like every other page, which did not happen. He's always like there in the background because you know that they're going to meet again. And you know that's, you know, what she's ultimately like thinking about. But the book does not focus heavily on like, oh, I need to find Han. I hope like we meet again soon. Like, no, she's got her own stuff to deal with. And I think it was important for it to be like that because she really had to put all of her energy into surviving because she's just always in a situation where it is possible that she would not. And I loved that. I loved that choice. I love Han Solo. I feel like I'm talking about him as if I don't like him, but I do. I do. But not in this book.
Well, he's just not he's not there.
Yeah.
So she can't rely on him and she wouldn't have regardless, like you said. And like he's almost just like turns into at the end of the book this ghost to her, just that kind of lives in her memory. And once she gets further into Crimson Dawn and she's actually not scrounging for food and scrounging to survive and all of that stuff, there's a quote partway through the book where she's like, it's easier to think of Han now. Well, because she's not missing out on anything. She's not missing something she didn't have. You know, she grows past what he could have been to her. And in Most Wanted, which I'm not finished with, but I mean, she doesn't trust him at all. And I don't know that she ever did. And I think the events of Solo too show that as well. She just so much has to become somebody who only can rely on herself. And Han can't be a weakness, and she doesn't want him to be a weakness either. And so she stores him away in her mind palace, kind of to keep him there, like in forever.
Yeah. Her character was so well done in this book. I think it's always like you have to trust that an author knows the voice of a character well enough to write a whole book about them. And that was not a worry for me going in, but definitely like I think it was a couple chapters and I'm like, we're here. We got this. And Most Wanted is one of my favorite Star Wars books of all time. I think everything about it is just wonderful. But at the same time, Qi'ra has never been like my favorite character, not someone that I like normally gravitate toward. This book almost like challenged that for me. Seeing her journey of like kind of, as you said, learning to rely on herself and realizing, oh, I still cannot trust anyone, but I have to, you know, do what I have to do to stay alive, survive, get through everything and kind of do what I need to do. And I totally just my train of thought it's off the rails. But
well, Qi'ra is compelling because she does do all those things and she does some ruthless things, but there's still a humanity to her, which makes her an endearing hero to read about. Because if she was just, you know, to reference Darth Bane, if she was just Darth Baning it up and just, you know, slashing people out of her way all the time and just leaving stuff in her wake without a care, you don't want to read a whole book about somebody like that, which that is counterproductive to just talking about reading the Darth Bane books, but he doesn't start out that way. So anyway, so yeah, I mean, because E.K. Johnston kept her humanity intact. It's, you know, she kept her heart. She just has it locked away behind 1,000 cages with 1,000 locks on them that nobody's going to get to unlock.
Right. I love it. Let's talk about some of your notes. You came with notes, and I love it. I love it so much.
Well, in the beginning, which I find it, now that I'm reading Most Wanted, she was so naive and at the beginning of Most Wanted. And here in the beginning of Crimson Climb, she's not naive anymore, but she's so defeated, being taken back by Moloch to Lady Proxima and just degraded and almost left for dead if that's what was going to happen to her. And it's like, if it doesn't, good for you, but you're now the lowest of the low. And there's a lot of anxiety that surrounds her. You know, we read about her having her clothes stripped away, not all of them, but the things she prized the most stripped away from her, and the new head of the Scrum Rats has them now, and no food. You know, she's at the end of the line for the crappy food they got anyway, and she's anxious, and she's living in this awful hour-to-hour situation, which I certainly can't identify with. And reading about it, EK does such a good job of being descriptive in a way that you do feel what your characters are feeling.
Yeah.
Even though, you know, if the plot's slow, at least you're kind of living through this character's lens. And I feel that with Qi'ra, and then you get to go on the journey with her past all of that, even though it's still there throughout, just a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, she really had to break her down at the beginning so that you could go on that journey. I think something that can be really difficult when you're taking a character that you already know what happens to them later, or you've seen them at a different point in their life. And the challenge, this is I think a challenge with the Ahsoka novel, is how can you take this character that's already grown so much and will do more growth later? How can they have a journey somewhere in the middle? And I think it was a really good way to start it, which is here she is back at the bottom, has to climb all the way up to the top. And you know she gets there, you know where she ends up. But that makes it more fun because you're like, well, what is she going to encounter that's going to get her to where we see her later? Back to our previous conversation about, you know, stories being told out of order and things happening at different points, and you know the ending, but you don't know the journey. Yeah.
And it's an interesting look at just being a woman, and like the person she gets sold to. I can't remember what that character's name is. I don't even know if it's a person. It's just, it's a being.
Yeah.
You know, she's put in this situation where you're like, oh, something really horrible might happen to her in a way that she's kept alive for whatever, you know, certain acts or certain uses. And thankfully it didn't go that route. And she gets out of that pretty quickly. But I liked, even though I keep saying person, is it an alien that rescues her from that situation? Rescues her.
I'm trying to remember.
The tall alien lady. I forget her name. I'm terrible at names sometimes. But I like that it's another woman helping a woman, right? It's kind of like, I see the potential in you, and I will get you out of this because this is not going to go well for you. And I might be bringing you into something that also won't go well for you, but you're going to have a better shot here. And even though she kind of despises Qi'ra, ultimately she did get her out of that real sketchy situation.
Yeah. And that's just a really interesting thing to me too about this book, is like the different beings that she encounters. You know, she has to decide, like, is this person going to help me, or is my helping this person going to get me to where I need to go next? You know, because it's all about, like, even if she does care about those that are around her, it still has to be about, what am I gaining from this? Which is so sad. It is so sad to have to be that she's constantly in that situation, but that's what it is. That's how you stay alive when you're with a crime syndicate. It's you always have to look out for yourself. I can't, like you said, can't imagine what that's like. But E.K. Johnston does such a good job of making you feel like you know what that's like.
Yeah. Like this quote that I highlighted, they're not your friends, she whispered to herself. When it's them or you, it always has to be you. Like she still has to tell herself that. That's 3/4 of the way through the book.
Yeah.
Because she still has that Qi'ra heart. She still is like, well, I could save them, but ultimately it has to be me. It can't be them. It has to be me. And as I was reading it, I was like, at what point, you know, if I'm in this situation, at what point am I like, is this even worth it anymore? Is it worth it to continue? So that she's got that strength that I'm questioning a fictional situation that I'm not in. I'm like, I don't think I could make it this far. And she just continues to have that grit and that determination. And I love that about her.
Yeah, me too. I mean, like, you see where she eventually ends up, and, like, you know, once again, making the hard choices and having to be like, yeah, I cared about Han once, and I still do, but also I'm just gonna fly away now.
Yep. I got other stuff to take care of, and you're not
Like,
part of the equation because it's not you and me, it's just me.
oh,
Ah.
oh,
The other note that I like to talk about with female characters in general, which I compare this to the Black Widow, the way she uses people's assumptions against her and or against them, assumptions about her against them to succeed.
Yeah.
And Kira's the same way. And I have another quote highlighted. I was going crazy in this one.
I love it.
They would have assumed all sorts of things about her, about them, and Voss let them do it because it shifted them away from thinking about Crimson Dawn. And it's a situation where he's taken her to be a distraction, but she understands that that's why she's there and she plays into it. And then things go really badly for everybody else for the most part, and almost her. But I love that. I love that discussion of looking at somebody who you just underestimate completely and you don't know anything about them. And all they're going to do is use that to their advantage.
Yes.
And it's like, this is why you should never assume things about people. This is why you should never think you know somebody probably fully, especially somebody like a character like this who's in this crime syndicate. She's on this ladder. She's going up, and I love, and Qi'ra, because we saw her first on the screen, she's small, diminutive, people would very easily be like, oh, I can take out this little girl, no problem.
Yeah.
And that doesn't work out for them.
No. No, that's like one of my favorite things in fiction where you have the character who appears to be one thing, and then you find out they're absolutely not that, but they continue to use that as leverage. I love that. And I love that Qi'ra just does that all the time.
She always fights to win.
I love that about her.
I do too. But it is sad, like you said. It's like she doesn't have anybody. You can never let anyone be close to you. She's kind of like the super spy here in Star Wars universe and very Cassian Andor, if you get close to me, you're going to get hurt, or I'm going to do the hurting because I'm going to be forced to.
Yeah.
It's a lonely existence.
Yeah, not a great life to live. But it's been that way for her for so long, being with the way she grew up, and like that's just, she may be used to that. Doesn't make it any better though.
No. And it's so it bleeds into the comics, which I have read the comics. I read them this year. It's almost like I knew I was going to be on your show, even though I didn't. It's all leading to this. And she ends up alone at the end. It's the same thing. It's like she tried, she climbed as high as she could. She tried to accomplish this really lofty goal, and it didn't work. And the Skywalkers did it instead. And there's even some panels where they're Luke and Leia are like in a cantina. I think they're looking for Qi'ra specifically, and she's just sitting in a corner by herself with a hood up. And I'm like, ugh, like it's a knife to the gut because Luke and Leia at least have each other.
Yeah.
And Qi'ra doesn't have anybody.
Oh, I love when Star Wars does that. I love when Star Wars is like, yeah, this person is strong and is really good at what they do, and even if they don't succeed, like they're gonna try again, but also like they're miserable because of it. Like it just hits you so hard.
When you know that she must be thinking, because it's a normal reaction to think, well, what if?
Yeah.
What if I had gone with Han? What if I hadn't just gone off by myself? And that has to haunt, I mean, more than almost anything else she does.
Yeah.
What could have been?
Yeah. Oh,
this got real sad all of a sudden. Sorry.
Did. I didn't know Qi'ra was going to hurt me today. Here we are.
She's such a tragic character.
Really is. I genuinely hope that, like, I'm never a person who says, like, you have to read the books or the comics. If you just like the movies, if you just like the shows, if you just like screen stuff in Star Wars, that is fine. Enjoy what you're going to enjoy. That is what I always say. But I really hope that if people have watched Solo and they're like, oh, I wish we had more Qi'ra, I hope that people will read some of the books and comics that have her in them, because it's not, she's not on screen, but adds so much more depth to her character, and you get so much more of her story. You get when she's younger. You get her working her way up in Crimson Dawn. You get so much that happens after that. I just like it. There's so much good storytelling, and it's not on the screen, but it's still so valuable and so good.
Mm-hmm. And I'd love to see her come back to the screen, but
yeah.
I don't know. I want it to be a successful return. And if people haven't read, like you, I get it. If you don't want to read the stuff, that's not your thing. I totally understand. But would it be a disservice to her to bring her back without people having all this knowledge of everything she's gone through? And I think we're in a place where she could still make an appearance. And I would put it to Dave Filoni to do it. Like, the guy is not holding back, right? From putting characters back in things. I would hate for people to be like, well, she was just the girl in Solo. It's like, no, she's so much more.
It's an interesting hurdle, I think. When you have a character that originates, in this movie that a lot of people have seen, whether they liked it or not, they've likely seen her or have heard of her and know who she is. But then you go and you tell so much more of her story in a medium that not as many people are going to follow, which is just how it is. The Star Wars on screen is probably always going to be more popular than everything else. But it's interesting when you have all these other stories that a lot of people haven't read, like, you're making it harder for yourself then to be like, oh, we could bring her back in a show, or she could appear in a movie, and you could do it. And I think they could do it and be successful at it, but it's going to be harder because then you risk, because what you don't want to do is say like, oh, if you should go read all this extra stuff. Like, I love when that happens. I love when stories encourage, if you want to know more, you can go read. And they do a lot of times a pretty good job of saying like, we'll give you as much information as we can so that you're up to speed. But a lot of people still end up feeling like they're missing out because they haven't read things. It's hard. I mean, you can't please everyone. That's just the reality of making things in general. But it's hard. It's hard for fans. It's hard for the creators to kind of figure out like what that balance is.
Yeah. I mean, they've done it a little bit with Thrawn because I'd say a lot of people maybe haven't watched Rebels. So if you haven't seen Star Wars Rebels and you didn't read any of Timothy Zahn's novels, then you don't know who Thrawn is. But the overall reception in Ahsoka seemed fine. Yeah. And so maybe it was the first kind of like, okay, we're going to do this and see how it goes. And Qi'ra's a little bit different for a lot of reasons, but I thought it went okay. I don't think people were, they were probably like, why is he such a big deal at first? But you very quickly are shown why.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why he matters and why he's a threat, a very palpable threat.
Yeah.
And so I would like to see it back, but I don't know where she'd fit in. And it might be a project that we just haven't heard of yet, too.
Yeah, probably, because part of me was like, oh, if anything with that Lando series / movie / whatever ever happens, could she fit in there? But I'm like, first of all, I don't know, and second of all, that's one of those announced projects that you're like, I don't know if it's ever gonna happen.
I know. I would love for it too. I loved Donald Glover as Lando. And they went from series to movie. I'm like, go back to a series. Have it be the Calrissian Chronicles and have one of the chapters be how Lando and Qi'ra met. Because again, that's that fill in the blank storytelling that works so well in the Star Wars universe. And it would be, I'm sure Emilia Clarke would be like, sign me up right now.
Exactly.
And I want to see it because it's fun. It would be a fun episode. I just know it.
Oh, that would be so fun. I want that. I want the Rogue Squadron movie to happen. I think the last we heard, it might be happening again after it no longer
Patty's
happening.
Trying to make it happen.
Listen, you cannot you can I know we're going on a tangent, it's fine. You cannot give us that little teaser that was the best thing I've ever seen and then not do anything with it. That's not fair. That's not fair to anybody.
I know. Well, and I keep thinking, because they're doing these, Essential Legends things, and Rogue Squadron is one of them, and I'm like,
yes,
it's gotta happen. Like, I just feel it in my bones.
Yeah. And like, if they could potentially draw a lot from those books, and if they do, please, because those books are amazing. I'm not usually like huge on like books that center around like pilots. Like it's not always the thing in Star Wars that grabs me, but you grab the audiobooks and listen to all the things happening instead of trying to read all these space battles, which is what I struggled with at first with the Alphabet Squadron books, until I started listening to the audiobooks, and I was like, okay, I'm listening to the space battle happening, and that's a lot easier to follow than trying to read it. But if the Rogue Squadron movie is anything like the books that I've read so far, I have not read all of them, but that would be so cool. I want it. We need it. Give us more Wedge.
Well, and Patty seems very enthusiastic about this. Like, she, I guess, has, like, her father, somebody was a fighter pilot, and so, like, she has this very strong connection to that. I'm like, well, that's the person I want making that movie then, because the passion will show through. Just like with the first Wonder Woman movie that she did. We won't talk about Wonder Woman 1984. It's a thing that happened, but the first one, you see Patty in it, and you see all of her love for that character, and that it's kind of that same time frame of the fighter pilot stuff. Like, I'm sorry, tangenting about things that aren't Star Wars, but I think she would be so good at it, and I really want it right now.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll see what happens with Star Wars movies in the next 5 years, and if any of them are, I'm not saying they're not going to be successful, but listen, we've gone through bigger gaps in Star Wars movies. We'll be fine. The franchise is not in danger. Star Wars will continue to happen after us. I don't like thinking about that, but it's true, pretty much. But still.
That does kind of suck to think about.
I know. I brought it up to someone not that long ago, and they were like, why would you say that? I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Listen, we've been in a dark place so far. We're gonna stick
there. Star Wars is
somebody
fine.
else will enjoy it.
Star Wars is doing great. If it's not a show, it's a book. If it's not a book, it's a comic. If it's not a comic, it's merchandise. Everything is fine. Everything is going well. Star Wars is fine. I really hope that listening to this discussion will encourage more people to give this book a go. I will say, and I won't get into like all of it, but if you've previously read E.K. Johnston and you've been kind of meh for whatever your reasons are for that, I think that this is her best Star Wars book so far. She's done a lot of good things in the Padme books and in Ahsoka, but I think this one was in a lot of different ways, I think, her strongest. I think, and I noticed this with Star Wars authors who have written multiple books, is like they tend to get better every time. Like, I think as you write Star Wars, you learn more about it, and you learn about how you fit and what stories you're best at telling and what kind of characters you're best at writing. And I think this book really, like, she just really, really, really shines. And of course it's Qi'ra, so of course it's gonna be good. It doesn't matter if it's YA, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I think you should try it. I think especially if you liked Solo and you want more, Qi'ra, read this, read Most Wanted, read all of the comics that feature her. I need to finish them because they're very good. It's just it's so well done, and anything else you want to touch on about the book, about Qi'ra, about
I concur that I think this book from EK flows the best. It's not as halting. That's my biggest criticism of her other ones, it's just kind of halting until you get to the final stuff, and then
Yeah.
it takes off really fast. And it still does that at the end, but you get there in a more seamless way, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I did think about in the end, and we won't spoil everything in the end, but Qi'ra and a team are sent to a Jedi temple. Jedi temple?
I think so.
Sith temple. A Force user's temple.
Yes.
And it's very subtle, but she gets through the temple unscathed. Not everybody does.
Yeah.
In some real horrible ways. That kind of shocked me, actually, while reading it. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
This is kind of grody.
Yeah.
And it just made me wonder, between that and some of the things that happen in her comics, is she supposed to have a little bit of force sensitivity? Are we supposed to, or are we just supposed to maybe draw our own conclusions? But the temple thing stood out to me because she has no problems entering it, and she even comments to herself, it seems like it opened for her, and I was like,
So I did not pick up on this, actually, and then I read your note right before we started recording, and I was like,
okay.
Excuse me. I think it's really interesting. I really do need to go back and reread this book because I didn't pick up on that, but it's my favorite thing when someone comes on here for a discussion and is like, did you notice this? And I'm like, no, absolutely not. But now I'm going to go back and look for it. I love it. I love it. Because everyone reads a book differently and not everyone notices the same things. And that's why I love talking about them with all kinds of different people, because everyone reads a book, notices things, picks out things. Someone will be like, oh, like this made me think of this connection to this other story. And I'm like, I never would have thought of that if it were not for you. I think it could be hinting that she's force sensitive. I think it could also be generally just making us, in a fun way, think about like, oh, like you never really know who could be force sensitive, who's not. Because in Star Wars, you never know. Like sometimes someone could be like slightly in tune with it a little bit more so than others. But what does that mean? It's so like interesting to think about. And it was very, very rude of her in a nice way to kind of like throw this at us and be like, oh, like this could be a thing that someone else could maybe do something with later. And we're all like, why did you do that to us? But that's why it's so fun. Because authors will do that sometimes. They'll be like, I'm just going to leave this open-ended. And if anyone ever wants to pick that up and run with it, they can. And if not, that's also fine. Because the fans will, whether another author does or not.
Yeah. Well, and just her, in the movie, she knows who Maul is. She contacts him, and he kind of hints, in my opinion, that she's his new apprentice in a way. She's replacing Dryden, and he taught Dryden the fighting form that, of course, I'm not going to be able to remember what it's called because that's a thing. And Dryden teaches Qi'ra that, and she picks it up pretty quickly. I would love it. And it would make her comics arc very interesting as well.
It's interesting.
And that's all I'll say about that.
Well, if you would like to know more, go read the comics. Go read this book. Read Most Wanted.
Yes.
Watch Solo again. I need to do that. Also, if you have not read the Solo novelization, novelizations are not for everyone, and not every single novelization really adds more to the original movie. But the Solo novelization is a fantastic adaptation, and it adds things into it that make it even better. And the epilogue, when you get to at the end, has a really fun connection to another Star Wars character that you're not expecting to be in the epilogue of the Solo novelization. Highly recommend. Highly recommend also reading that. The scenes that are added in are just, wish they were in the movie. Understand why they weren't, but so glad that we got them in some form.
Yeah, I agree. It's probably one of my top 3 favorite of the movie novelizations.
Yes, it's so good.
So good. All of this stuff is so good. This grounded Star Wars I love it.
Me too. Me too. I have absolutely loved this. I've been looking forward to this ever since we scheduled it. And listen, better late than never is what I like to always say. This book came out a while ago, but it is, you know what? Someone out there could be reading it for the first time and they're like, wow, there's a new discussion on this book I just read. That is beautiful. I love it. Before we go our separate ways, why don't you tell the people where they can find you on the internet and all of the things that you do?
I do too many things. You can find me on 2 weekly shows. My book show is podcast. Ugh. Source Pages is my reading podcast where my co-host Brian and I, what we do is we read source material for the geeky TV shows and movies that are coming out. For instance, Dead Detectives, which is coming out on Netflix. We're going to read some of those comics next week. We are on a network where the flagship show is Marvel Cinematic Universe, so we lean heavily into that. But we also do Star Wars, DC, and then just kind of whatever we want to talk about. So it's a really fun show. If you like to know characters and stuff ahead of time, or if you want to learn more on the tail end, that's what we are there for. And then I'm on Multiverse News, which is another weekly show, and we just do entertainment news every Tuesday live stream, and it drops on Wednesdays. So check out things on the Stranded Panda Network. We've got all kinds of stuff over there.
That is so fun. Yeah, everyone should check all of that out. I'm going to.
We're everywhere.
Yes, everywhere all the time.
Starts to feel that way.
It does. Oh, thank you so much for doing this, for talking about books and Star Wars with me.
Thank you for having me. I was very, very excited to do this.
Me too.
Now This Is Lit is part of the Faraway Fandom Network. It is produced by Devor Montum and written, hosted, and edited by me. Jose Jimenez designed our podcast art. You can keep up with the show on Substack and Now This Is Lit, and find the show wherever you get your podcasts. There are so many ways you can support the show, and all of those ways are linked in the show description. The newest way is to become a member of our Patreon. For $1 a month, you can get access to an exclusive show and a sticker. And if we get 500 people to support the Patreon per month, I can hire an editor. That would be great for me, and maybe for you too. So if you'd like to support the show with just $1 a month, you can do it that way. Or you can just keep listening and sharing the episodes. That is also helpful, and I appreciate it. For more book reviews and Star Wars Book Celebration, follow Star Wars Book Reviews on Instagram and TikTok.